All right, Dave Ramsey on prenups. Let's go.
Okay,
When I first started this show, I was 100% never get a prenup under any circumstances. Don't get married if you love your stuff more than you love her. Period. Just don't do it. That's how I started. Now, having done this a long time, I have one caveat that I've added about a decade ago to this. And that is, if two people are getting married, one of them has extreme wealth, there's an extreme difference. Like I had one guy who was marrying a lady who had $10 million and he didn't have 2 nickels. Okay? I suggested a prenup to them to keep their relationship pure, about relationship and not about money. And the bigger reason I suggested it to them is my now experience 30 years later has been the prenup in that case is not really for that couple. It's for all the weirdos in their families.
So I like his comment that the prenup keeps the marriage pure. And I believe the same thing about setting up an offshore trust. If your spouse knows that they can get a divorce at any time, that's great. Anybody should be allowed to enter and exit a marriage as they wish. However, if your spouse is financially incentivized to leave the marriage, that's not healthy for anybody. But if your spouse knows that they're not going to be able to take a large portion of your money, I think they're going to be more likely to try to figure things out.
Because all of a sudden, crazy mother-in-law swoops in from the other side once the $10 million golden goose shows up. And you got to look at it. Then you got a little piece of paper and you look at her and go, sorry, Ma, got a prenup. Can't do nothing. And so it gives them.
I would like to think that if you're entering into a marriage, you're not at the point in your life where your parents are going to pull you out of that marriage. However, a lot of people never get there and still end up getting married. So maybe in that case, a prenup is a wise move.
Them a defense mechanism against crazy in their family, because one thing we know about wealth is it magnifies everything, and that includes crazy.
That is true. Earlier in my career, I worked with clients who, some of them did not have much money, and I had some crazy clients. Now I work with some clients who have very significant wealth, and some of them are still very crazy. Most of my clients are wonderful, good people. But if you have enough clients, you'll have a few crazy ones.
When you got crazy members in your family and you marry $10 million, dadgum, the crazy comes out, you know? So in that case, I did recommend a prenup in extreme differences. But for 99% of the people, just regular folk getting married, and, you know, I had one lady call me up one time and said her boyfriend had a 1968 frame-up restoration Mustang and he wanted a prenup. And, you know, my answer to that is don't marry this bozo. He loves his car more than you.
Alternative strategy is you don't have to live too close to your parents or in-laws either. Go visit them, stay in touch, but if it's healthier for your marriage to keep some distance, healthy relationships are wonderful, and sometimes the healthiest relationship has some distance.
You know, that's the answer to that, and that's not a, you know, that might not jive with these other guys' podcasts or whoever it is you're listening to, but most of the time I agree with where you're coming from, Jesse, and that is the prenup is simply planning the divorce in advance. 52% of the marriages end in divorce. No, they don't.
Well, it's hard to quantify that statistic because that is based on future projections, and we don't know what's going to happen to a marriage until years and years later. And just because a marriage ends in divorce, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad situation. Relationships have different purposes. Some end in death, but some end in divorce, and you could still have a great marriage that does not survive one of the parties.
No, they don't. Not when you take out people with 4-year degrees.
Now, Dave adds a bunch of parameters that change the way you're viewing the statistics to narrow it down to a certain sect of people who are more likely to stay married, but he's openly cooking the statistics to change his argument of what percentage of marriages end in divorce. Anyways, let's go, Dave.
Not when you take out people who regularly attend a house of worship. Not when you take out people who the parents on neither side were divorced. When you take those statistics out, almost 90% of the people make their marriage work. Oh, and you're older than 22 years old, and you didn't have a baby before marriage. You can take these things out. Boom.
But that's probably not most people getting married, Dave.
Boom, 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 boom. Success rate of marriage goes way up. You make $50,000 a year or more household income. You didn't have a baby before marriage. You didn't get married in high school. You know, all these kinds, you take all that crap out, you got about a 90% survival rate of marriages.
And I don't know that I would call it crap if somebody came from a family that had divorced parents, or somebody didn't go to college, or somebody had a child young, or somebody doesn't attend a place of worship. Those don't necessarily mean that somebody is a good person, but apparently those marriages do last more often. But people who come from broken or rougher situations are some of the most beautiful, strongest, wisest people out there.
So that 52% figure includes a whole bunch of other crap going on of people who weren't going to make it anyway. So you can't use 52% of marriages into divorce, because they really don't.
I mean, I guess if you're evaluating and you do fall into the small category that he talked about, you're less likely to end up divorced. But regardless, people change, time change. A prenup is not a bad thing to have, although courts can disregard a prenup. If you're serious about protecting your assets from divorce, you should look at creating an offshore trust, something a U.S. court cannot disregard.